So, first and foremost, thank you so much for joining, and also welcome to the podcast of Women in Leadership, Women Who Make It Happen series. Obviously, this is just highlighting senior female leaders such as yourself, your journeys, where you got to where you are today, and just helpful hints and tips for people looking to get into that space. I suppose for the benefit of the podcast, it'd be good to do a couple of introductions from both sides. So I'll kick us off. So I'm Anna. So I work for Interquest. So we're a leading search consultancy business split across data and analytics, technology, engineering, and then more into a governance space of risk and compliance. I'm based in Amsterdam, so we service the Benelux region, including Germany and Ireland. Over to you.
Thanks, Anna, and thanks for having me today. I'm Natalia. I'm currently taking the role of VP of Data Science and Risk at Billie, which is a leading B2B BNPL provider, originally focused on DACH region, but now scaling up in Europe. So taking care of data science, analytics, but also credit risk, fraud prevention capabilities at the company. In the last 16 years, I've been staying in Fintech and the startup environment, working across multiple products, multiple countries. And by my background, I'm economist. I'm in my PhD in economics. And since then, I've been always in the financial technology sector, building data capabilities, analytics capabilities, credit risk from scratch. And this is what I'm enjoying doing.
That's quite a broad scope and also quite focused on their kind of economics and analytical side. And I suppose if we can look at it from a little bit more around your early years and what motivated you to sort of pursue a career in that field, would you say there was any kind of specific moments or people that inspired your journey to move into that particular area?
Yeah, I think so. I actually liked always data, math. That was my favorite subject at school. And indeed, I got a brilliant teacher of math when I was still in my school. And I think he was giving me a lot of this passion for math. Mm-hmm. And in my early career, I was doing internships in the big FMCGs companies, where as well I had a very lucky with a manager who was teaching me a lot of practical things, like to build a VBA application. By the way, is this still a thing today? Might be, no, I have no idea. But this is where I got passion for very much using data for solving very practical business problems. And I realized that I want to work in the environment where data is core. So FMCG at that time was very much like sales and marketing driven, and not that much data. And that's why I kind of moved to the financial domain, where at that time that's probably was the environment where data was the core for decision making, for building credit risk assessment models. And you know what? I'm still there.
No, of course. And I suppose having a fairly impressive background, particularly across like technology, economics, statistics, and you've had a really broad journey, both from what you're doing content-wise, but also location-wise across your kind of career from the UK to Italy to France, Berlin, Switzerland. They're fairly diverse backgrounds across all of those different countries, and all the sort of companies that you worked for apply data in different ways, but also the usages and belief of data in organization changes just depending on people's sort of thought processes, application, or just knowledge of data. How would you say that sort of diverse environment would have shaped your sort of leadership style, but also your approach to data science? And it'd be good just to understand from your side as well how data has been viewed.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. And frankly, I think I've been very lucky to have an opportunity to work across these multiple countries. But I also spent 8 years working with the Indian company. I spent a lot of time in India, in Bangalore, and now that's one of my favorite countries. You know, I think that's definitely shaped me a lot as a leader, as also data science leader. And I think probably just starting overall, the way you look at other countries, you really get an experience knowing that there are plenty of styles people work in, and it's not that they're good or bad; they're just different. And this is where you learn to work with people of different mentalities, of different mindsets. You
Mhm.
just open to how people perceive things differently,
Yeah.
and I think that's definitely opens up your mind as a leader. And I think also the fact that I was moving across multiple countries, when you come to live abroad, well, it on your own, it's
Hmm.
very difficult for the first few months as expat, right? You need to
Yeah.
find a place, you need even make simple things like a doctor appointment. And
Yeah.
it's kind of drop you in the cold swimming pool, right? Of languages, especially if you move in a country where there is no your mother language, different cultures. This kind of make you feel comfortable with the level of risk you're prepared to take. So I
Mm.
think that's what also teach me to just not afraid to fail, I guess, which is also working in the risk domain.
Yeah.
Good background for just perceiving risk differently, calculating multiple options, multiple scenarios, and just builds your kind of resilience muscles.
Mm.
Yeah, and what else? I think also when you work in the diverse culture, it's not very easy. You can't just assume you put people together and they kind of figure out and get along naturally, right? So that's never happens, and you also need to find a way to facilitate the communication. That's probably as well teach you how to translate complex things with a lot more simplicity, clarity that everyone can understand it and stick to. So I think that there is a lot of this, I would say, fundamentals are changing, the defaults are changing as well.
Yeah.
With regard to data science, I wouldn't say that it's like geographically different. I probably would say I definitely seen an evolution over the last 50 years, right? What data scientists were doing before and how they were building models. I remember they started with a simple like linear regressions, logistic regressions. For us to build a new algorithm like random forest and they implemented it into production, that was like completely mind blowing. And now when you think about new technologies, you can, bring new models in a matter of just days and hours. So that's completely different. That was
Mm.
also the period where there was a lot of analysts who wanted to become data scientists, and well, they didn't have much experience, and basically they considered themselves data scientists as long as they were good in Excel. So
Yeah.
that was as well this type of period. So it's kind of long journey, and you see different sides of this. Again, wouldn't say it's country specific, but um, I think just the fact that again I was working in multiple countries and multiple environments makes me realize more what specifically is needed for each specific setup, right? And there is a study I think by MIT that was. Doing the research on the English Football's Premier League, and there's
Oh,
a
okay.
very strong correlation between the number of countries the manager worked in and the team performance. And there was like very strong correlation for each country the manager had worked in. The team got extra. I don't remember the exact number, but extra points. So,
Yeah.
and I strongly believe that when you are exposed to international countries, international teams, that's what brings extra strengths and extra understanding where you want your particular team to be and how you can
Mm.
bring it successfully there.
I think that's also just a really important topic as well, because I think relocation can be overlooked quite substantially. And like you said, for the first few months, it's hard. It's where you go somewhere you don't understand the language. It's as simple as finding where you want to get a coffee in the morning, or where your GP is going to be, or how you find a GP, or how you even make an appointment, and where your local food shop is, what that says on the labels, because it's all in a different language. And I think it offers a
Absolutely.
lot of development from a personal perspective as to learning an international environment. work life balance is always different from location to location as well. But also thought processes are always incorporated into that at the same time as to what that means and where it's coming from. And I think data, as you've kind of moved through the different companies as well, data and the belief in data to make decisions is becoming more and more prominent in organizations looking to develop and innovate at a really fast pace. So I always say that's kind of driven from the top down of being able to make those decisions. But when it comes to the areas that you would deal with, such as like credit risk or more into the risk side, it can have more of an impact because of that's also dealing with kind of asset default, or if you're looking at it from an underwriting perspective, where the authorization sits and how that needs to be monitored, even from like a KPI side. So I would say kind of with the belief in data moving into that space, have you seen resistance a little bit more or a need for a more manual approach as you go into more of like the credit space or the risk area in comparison as to other areas of the business?
Well, I would say yes and no. From
Mm.
one side, I definitely see fintech as being one of the industry that embraces data and
Yeah.
overall data-driven approach a lot. One domain we can talk about is fraud prevention, right? We know
Yes.
that the losses due to fraud just increasing year over year, and that's where data and machine learning and AI technologies
Mhm.
are the front foot to support the teams fighting the fraud. And if there is someone who didn't jump this train, I'm sorry for them, because
Yeah.
that's the only way the companies can fight successfully fraud. And I'm not just saying, well, you build AI model and everything is solved, right? It comes together, and there is a lot of more components that needs to be built on the operational side, on just creating your fraud strategy in the right way and having a lot of different tools and solutions that prevent different type of fraud. But without data and AI, this domain just won't survive. But at the same time, there have been also quite, I would say, some cautious steps, especially coming from regulators, right? And if you are working, for example, in the consumer space and in the B2C segment, this is where it becomes tricky, because the regulator, and especially now with, for example, EIU Act, they want companies to be extremely transparent about how they take
Mm.
decisions. So if, well, I take Billie as an example, it is B2B slightly different, but nevertheless, the big picture remains the same. So the end users want to know why the company took a certain decision, why they were accepted or why they were rejected, or if they were accepted, why for the specific limit amount, for example, right? And if before, I would say like 10 years ago, when we were building machine learning models, everyone was considering more it's like magic black box. No one
Yeah.
really understood what comes out of this. But now there is more and more pressure on giving visibility on why certain things happened, why certain decisions have been taken. So I think it's coming both ways. And of course, I think one thing remains important, that especially with generative AI being overly spread, that we still are learning a lot about AI technologies, and there is still a need for kind of human in the loop. Of
Yeah.
course, you can interpret it as much as you can, and the companies put it in different ways, but I would say they're still in the situation where we need a human just to overlook some of the decisions and see that, directionally things are moving in the right way, and that there are no exorbitant risks that the companies are taking, or especially not taking decisions that are not in favor or discriminating some of the populations.
Yeah, I mean, I always think it comes down to kind of human and AI interaction and how you kind of collaborate those two for so to see how you can look at the more of an automation side, and fraud detection and fraud analytics is huge. And it was something where, as you moved into more of an AI automation space to be able to detect fraud, regulators came a little bit away from that and had a little bit of pushback almost as to how you meant to deal with customer data from a technological perspective, to trust that it's actually going to pick up the fraud as it comes through? How can you have that much trust in data? And I think that's where it comes down to people like yourself having so much knowledge and so much interaction with technology and more modernized technology. It almost is a coaching piece to the both of you as to being able to elaborate on, okay, well, this is how the fraud detection works, and these are the benefits that we get by having artificial intelligence or machine learning and assistance building out those different types of products. I don't know how you have seen it from, across the UK, Berlin, France, India, Switzerland, as to how that sort of collaboration has gone as that's evolutionized over the last decade or so.
Well, that's certainly the case. Yeah, absolutely. I still remember, the times it was early 2010 when we were looking at using some social data to build some fraud prevention models or credit risk assessment products when your data was public on Facebook, on LinkedIn. And we were just looking for some signals and some innovation saying, well, actually, looking at your social footprint, one can get better scores, right? Or have higher chances of getting a credit. And that was absolutely crazy times. Now, if you think about it, no one obviously is doing this.
Yeah.
But that was the time when even a lot of companies were, founded to specifically build a product around this.
Yeah.
So now, obviously, with all the data privacy regulations, that's no more the case. And there is always a consent needed to be taken from the user. So it's definitely a lot more responsible. And I think that's absolutely the right way of doing things. I think the regulation, I'm never looking at it as a blocker for innovation. Actually, of course, we know regulation is coming way behind where innovation is going, but nevertheless, it provides us kind of framework and some fundamentals of the rules and guidelines that needs to be followed in order to build a product, a sustainable product.
Yeah.
Right. If you look across different countries, so there are definitely different states of this. I would say the Europe is way more conservative with regard to how the data can be used versus, for example, Asian markets. Mm-hmm. And we're not talking about China, but in China, there is still a lot where basically any data point can be collected about the behavior of the user, and they're just taking it absolutely natural. Which, we can argue whether this is fair or not fair, whether users are happy to do this or not. Well, this is what it is. But I think what is important is what I learned is even if you're a data science team, you always intrinsically think about, well, I get more data, I will be able to build better models. But we always need to take a business side of things as well and to think about the user. Mm-hmm. Right. And when you build a product, you always need to balance metrics that relates to how accurate your models are and how much data you need for training them, but also the user behavior. If you start asking everyone to connect your bank account, to make a selfie, to submit the copy of ID cards, you name it, you will see a huge amount of drop-off, right? Because users just are not prepared to do it, or you will see a lot of negative selection. Just processors will be happy to do this, right? So it's always a kind of strategic move here. And I think that is also what is important for me when we talk about data science teams, is that these people are not only focused on training models the most accurate as possible and sitting kind of in the ivory tower, but these are people who talk to business and they understand more broadly what business problem they are trying to solve and try to balance all considerations on the user side, on the product side, but also on the data science part and any credit risk for prevention assessments.
Yeah, I think it's also really important just to highlight the integration from data to product to user to business. And I think it's around remembering that obviously you're looking at it from a very analytical perspective sometimes, and everything that you're looking at makes sense to you. But to people in, I don't know, sales or people in compliance, it can mean absolutely nothing. So then it's being able to sort of translate what you have into business acronym so people can understand the benefit and the usages as to what this is actually going to do to benefit the user. And everyone is becoming very user focused and very quite user obsessed in terms of developing the product against market. And that also ties back to data science from sort of like data insights at the same time as well. And with the kind of businesses that you worked in, obviously fintechs have evolved significantly across the last couple of decades. And I suppose from your time of working with fintechs, what would you say are the most sort of profound changes you've witnessed? And how do you see it if you're kind of looking at where we are at the moment and what's happened over the last few years as we're sort of moving forward? Where do you see the next sort of wave of disruption playing out?
Yeah, that's a good question, and
It's a $1 million question that sometimes, isn't
yeah,
it?
absolutely. It was quite a big journey, and I think, well, the fintech for me now is basically mainstream, right? You look around and you see fintech everywhere, and I think for me, I definitely witnessed the regulator stance on it, coming from the environment where there was no regulation at all. When the companies were doing some crazy things around collections, around how they evaluate risk, and how they use technologies, and specifically in the UK, for example, with the FCA having very strong stance on the fintech regulation. Now it is an environment where there are a lot more guidelines and rules that the companies need to abide to. How we evaluate creditworthiness, how we account for affordability, what are good and bad collection practices, how much you can charge the user. So there are a lot of tons of different details. And I think, again, with the end user being the core of the target audience, I think that's important that this regulation came.
Yeah.
Right. And I still remember the times when there were like crazy margins and I think where directionally this goes, and it also became evident over the last couple of years with the whole macroeconomic situation that basically the biggest sanity check that is happening for fintech is to create sustainable business models. There are plenty of fintechs that were operating just with the mindset of growth at any cost, without taking care of what are the unit economics, other margins, where the losses, and whether this longer term makes a company sustainable or not.
I think it's also very important from the sustainability side is obviously if we think of user base, more digital technologies attract Gen Z's, Z as you, it would probably be fair to say. And what they and the shift that we've seen in their mindset is they do look for sustainable or ethical organizations that they actually work with. So it's people who kind of offset carbon footprint or have kind of the sustainability at the forefront of the products that they're building with a sustainable business model. I think that's quite key to highlight from a competitive advantage as well. If you're going to be that technological with the sort of user base that you target, it's become quite a big focus for them in that concept as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I think this is, that's a whole mindset shift, but also like the financial situation just, push companies to go in this direction, right?
Yeah.
If you do not create a sustainable business model, if you do not have understanding how your company is going to make money or when it becomes profitable, that becomes the model that just doesn't work longer term. And the investors are now becoming very attentive to growth, of course, but also how sustainable it is. And when the company is just moving towards profitability and sustaining itself. So I think that's the biggest shift. And I think we will see more and more of this happening. And I'm happy to see this because we definitely seen situations where, the companies were just creating the price competition where that completely didn't make sense, and just bidding on the lower prices in order to be in the merchants, the partners, but ultimately the price completely didn't make sense because it didn't cover any costs or any even transactional costs. So that was a lot of the situations in the past. I think now the situation has improved significantly. So that's one thing definitely happening. The second one, as I already was mentioning, the generative AI, right?
Yeah.
That came. We're already seeing companies like Klarna using a lot the OpenAI tools and cutting out on a lot of headcounts. But I think the question is not about cutting the headcounts, but actually using the resources in an efficient way. And just improving productivity, improving certain processes, fast tracking certain processes that what technology helps us to do. So I think that will become more and more, and the companies that are not yet on this train of using generative AI for whatever use case, right? I think we're still in the space where companies are testing and trying and not necessarily building it into products. Some of them do, but I would still say that the productivity gain that the companies can get out of this is huge. Again, there needs to be fundamentals that doesn't come just, start using ChatGPT, but actually, if you want to really leverage these technologies, you need to think about it, how you maintain the systems longer term. That also came back to the question of how companies are prepared for this in terms of data quality, in terms of systems. Majority of companies are already on the clouds, but still it's kind of facilitated the ones who are not yet to move to the cloud, to start using APIs. And that's great, just great to see the whole healthiness of the market.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really nicely to using the generative AI and how people are embedding it and also maximizing it, or using it to its full maximization, because we've probably, if we're really honest as a market, kind of touched the iceberg of it at the minute. I feel like there's a lot more it's able to generate and utilize and support with business expansion. But then it's also remembering the sustainability. So then it also comes down to growth at what cost, and where people are kind of happy to do the growth and how fast they're willing to do the growth whilst missing a few steps, or who's going to do it in a really sort of navigated manner in order to have that long-term business side. And I suppose you're someone who's worked in small organizations and some of the larger ones as well. How do you balance sort of immediate business needs with long-term growth and development of your teams? And by long-term growth, it's almost like long-term growth of the organization against team growth as well.
Yeah, again, good question.
Many plates.
Absolutely. Well, I think what is important is to have the long-term vision, right? The long-term vision for the company, where the company wants to be, but also, where, for example, the data team needs to be. And for me, what is important that the data team is not perceived in isolation. The data team is a partner that supports the whole problem-solving space and supports the business stakeholders in deciding what direction to go, which strategies to apply. Again, in my case, specifically in the Fintech, a lot of the data science, data initiatives all around credit risk assessment, fraud prevention. And I think the key topic, the longer-term vision, was to move company in the direction of profitability. That's probably across all the companies that I've been there. And I think once you have this vision, it's kind of easier than to make sure that the short-term objectives that are set for the teams are better aligned with this vision. So you kind of can always cross-check and make sure that the small steps, small tactical steps allow you to move in the direction where the company want to be. And that also supports a lot of prioritization. You just put everyone on the same page. It's probably more changing regarding resource allocation, but again, I think here that's where the teams needs to be balanced between potentially having a percentage allocated to solving for the longer term goals,
Yep.
and the percentage or for resources focused on the shorter term goals. Again, making sure that they're still speaking the same language, right? That they're still solving the same bigger goal, and that's probably the question as well, of kind of being flexible, right? There are situations where you need to allocate 100% on solving something immediately. You have a fraud attack, you need to drop everything and just make sure that you are not losing money. But then, for example, there is no more fraud attack, there is business as usual. This is where you can start allocating more resources towards the longer term goal, and can build not the build a strategic agenda how you want to reach these goals. What is important as well is to have the metrics that you can measure where you're currently and whether indeed you're moving in the direction you want to move. And for me specifically, and for my teams, that was always the case where we were defining what will be the team KPIs. And that's important because, well, and these are, I would say, business KPIs, right? We are not talking about creating the model with the accuracy 0.9%, right? That's never been the case because, again, you ask, well, you have the most advanced model with the highest accuracy, but if you don't know how to apply it, if you don't know what business metrics this model will move, then it's completely useless. So for my team, the KPIs were always related to the business. For example, fraud losses, acceptance rate, the credit loss as well, you name it. Sometimes it's data cost as well, because as well we are paying as a company a lot of money for buying various data, and that also becomes a question of optimization. Do we actually need all this data, or we can actually balance it with the return we are getting on this, or with the level of risk we are observing? So that's where I found very useful and actually motivating for the team as well, because they can see immediately how the team contribute to the business, right? Independently what the model performance is, but they can look at the dashboard or the business report and immediately say, okay, now we see the losses going down. That's because we implemented X, Y, Z, and that allows us to reach this. And I think for data scientist motivation, that's actually one of the core elements, to see their initiatives contributing directly and creating the business value, instead of just, put on the shelf. You created the model, but no one's actually using it and not interested to implement. So that's really makes data scientists super exciting about the jobs they're doing.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say as well, like fintechs, it can be carnage. And I think by having immediate goals and also long-term goals, having clear KPIs, it kind of keeps everyone on track as to why. And I think that's also really important. It's the why are we doing this? How are we going to do it? And what do we want to achieve, rather than just all running at one thing, all running at another. Although there's agility needed in order to support the change that happens fairly rapidly in fintechs, it's also just understanding the kind of monitoring of performance against it and the reasons as to why, which are portrayed from the business as to where they want to go to, but then just their contribution into making sure they understand why that happens and where it goes to. And I suppose if you look at fintechs as well, and we work with small fintechs all the way to big banks, far in advance would a long-term objective be for a fintech? Some of the bigger places, they look sort of 3 to 5 years in advance. Whereas if you bring it back, some people struggle to look 6 months because it's a very ever-changing market. So I suppose, how would that sit from what you would be doing as to how long is long-term?
Yeah, well, I would say we probably in the environment where we are, the horizon we are planning for is usually 1 year.
Yeah.
That's where we have like our long-term goals, where we want to be, and then shorter ones, what we are achieving each and every month or each and every quarter, for example. We also have a strategy that we are looking beyond just 1 year. We are looking at 3 and 5 year horizon, but I would say that's way more hypothetical and just directionally where we want to be. We're not talking about what countries we want to be present in and what does it mean for data science team, on credit risk team. So we also kind of have some components where we look to focus on, for example, or they are currently focusing on the fraud, but then there is also the merchant aspect, for example, that we've never been actually exploring, so that potentially can come later. But always with the idea in mind that we can potentially associate some value or some like money, right, that we can get out of all these initiatives that we are putting up there.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And all of that comes from teams as well. And you've worked in somewhere where you've had 0 people, you've grown teams to 40 people, you've built teams from the ground up, which goes without saying. Obviously, if we look at that, that can be a fairly difficult task. And it is a big task going from 0 to 40 and trying to find the people for those particular positions, and culture comes into it, ability comes into it. So I suppose, what's your philosophy when it comes to structuring and growing a high-performing data science team?
Yeah, indeed, that was quite a journey, and I should say it's never a linear journey, right?
No.
I was growing the teams from 0 to almost 40 people, but that's not was happening over the night. That was over the course of the years, and I think this is what is important to know, that for me to grow the data science team was also to understand where the company is moving and what kind of needs the company has, and what kind of capabilities, what structures we need as well. So there was a lot of these considerations where you try to understand what exactly it means. It doesn't mean that you just go and look for 40 identical profiles. You actually create the structure in your head, right? With some focus. For example, at some point you need some domain expertise, especially in the fraud. Well, as much you can train people doing this, but that definitely facilitates a lot if people already had some experience and understand what fraud is, what kind of patterns they exhibit, and what the potential strategies and tactics that they can use. But at the same time, there was a situation, for example, where we decided to build our machine learning platform internally, and that's where we wanted much more technical capabilities, the people who had experience building the machine learning pipelines. So I think what is important for me when you grow the team is to have a very clear vision for this team, what the team is solving for, whether it is small sub team or whether it is a bigger team. So you can also, tell people this story, right? So that the people don't come just as another data scientist. They come with a specific task and with a specific agenda for them, right? And I think that's also important for the data scientists because, well, the market is extremely competitive.
Yes,
probably
the market
less so
is
now, but
competitive there.
I think a couple of years ago it was extremely difficult to find the right talent, and I think this is what attracts people when they understand how they contribute to the business goals. Again, I know I've been repeating myself multiple times, but I think this is extremely crucial for the data team, not just to be, a service team, but to be a really business partner, and that their success is actually the business success. And
I think that's really important for them to understand as well, just the connectivity from business to tech, and where that sort of comes in from quite a stringent line as to how this actually helps the business go to where it wants to do, and what their job does to impact the business. And you may say that you've kind of repeated yourself, but I think that's quite a good point to emphasize.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, that's always been the case when I was looking for data scientists, actually for the problem solvers, right? I remember that was the time when a lot of deep learning models been very popular. A lot of vision models were as well utilized by, for example, companies to make KSC. And we had a lot of candidates who were coming and saying, well, I want to build a deep learning model. And I said, look, that's not our case, right? I actually do not care that much about what kind of algorithm you are using. I need you to solve the business problem, right? Whether you are using sophisticated algorithm or whether you are using a very simple model. The result of this, what matters. But of course, you need to balance, right? In order to implement deep learning model, you need all the platform in place, all the technology in place. And if you don't have these capabilities in house, that means a lot of investment needs to come in. So for me, that was for more like pragmatic solution we can build, and the faster we can deliver that was what I was expecting from data scientists. And now, especially in the world where you have copilots, you have a lot of tools that facilitate one to just actually build the model. I think that becomes more and more important, that people that work in data science team are the ones that are able to understand what technology to use, to choose what will work for the specific business problem, either they had already experience or just even trying themselves and trying to think about like all aspects of this, not only in terms of accuracy but also implementation costs, maintenance costs, interpretability, whatever you needed. That's what is important. And I think another aspect as well, these people need to talk, right? People need to talk to other teams, to engineering, to product, to business. And indeed, this communication should go both ways. The data science team needs to enable the rest of the business with their insights and recommendations, right? But they also need to be able to collect the requirements in terms of what problem they are solving and why, right? As you said, the question why is extremely important, right? Why we are solving this, why we are confident that this approach will take us to where we want to be. And that becomes really the task of the data scientists, right? And no one else will do that for them. I remember back at times there were like business analysts who were going, collecting the requirements and then bringing them to the technology team. Now, this probably profiles still exist, and they fairly take place in certain environments, but not in the fintech. We need data scientists to make this job, to go and talk to the business, to be able to explain their results in a very like easy language, plain English, so the business understands what exactly is happening and why they need to sign in.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good approach as well, because if it comes from your side where you have a really clear vision or view, and clearly that would be subject to change as people come in, as to the type of people you need, areas of focus, and the kind of connectivity that they have to the business, of giving them the story as to why. And then you have the people with specialist areas, people who are more generalized, more senior, more junior, and people who understand communication with engineers, with product, with business, to then really understand the end goal. They start really working together from a collaborative perspective, which spins off into high performance. And people buy into people, and people buy into the journey. And if they're sort of brought into both of those with a really clear outlook of where it's going, that drives high performance in a team as well. So it's quite a clear outlook from where it starts with you as to how it's driven down and executed, as to where that can come into play. And I suppose kind of moving on now to talking about or reflecting on you within the industry over that time as well, and across your career, what would you say has been some of the most pivotal moments or decisions which have influenced your career?
Yes, it's an interesting one. Actually, I never thought to be working with fraud, for example. That's something that definitely came to my plate later on. But I should say, probably joining my first startup company that was Wongar in the UK. I don't know if you remember this company. That was back in the early 2013, 14. That's when I joined the company and was their first data scientist. I think that's was quite a pivotal moment for me. That basically brought me to the whole world of startups, of fintech, which I'm still in. And I think I realized that I enjoy doing this. I realized that I like to work in the startup companies. I like to build products. I like to build teams. I like to build connections. And I think that's still stays with me. So I think that's something that I'm still extremely grateful for, people trusting me. And I truly enjoyed this journey. probably the same refers to my next company when I joined the Indian startup Zest Money. I joined the company at the very early days when there were just 3 co-founders, and I was just fresh from my first maternity leave, and it was completely new country for me. I never been to Asia before, never been to India before. Completely new mindset. Completely new defaults as well. The things that you take for granted. So I think since I joined, I've probably been to India 20 times, and there was COVID times as well. So there was a lot of pivotal moments, but I think just as well, feeling this environment, as we were discussing before, where you open up to completely new country and you need to find your way. Even the hiring process were completely different. And there's some small situations like, you hire someone and the people just don't show up on their first day. Well, I actually never experienced this in Europe. And that was my first experience when I had it in India, right? And apparently is a practice that can happen, and you just need to be able to deal with it if it happens. So, small moments like this that actually helped me to grow as a manager, as a leader, but also helped me understand better what people live in their daily life, why they have different behaviors, and especially talking about, for example, female, well, data scientists particularly, but also just in general, female leaders, managers, analysts. So they have extremely challenging life, and they have to balance a lot of things that here in Europe we take for granted. And I think that's also allowed me just to understand we are all different, and understand how to navigate the team, how to navigate challenging situations in a way that is respectful for all those different cultures and mindsets.
And I think that's also really important and quite interesting is the fact that you like to build, and every sort of decision you make has been to build or scale or build teams or build products or just build the company. And also from the diversity of cultures that you have dealt with, it's learning to adapt leadership and management skills, because they come into kind of 2 different facets, management and leadership, in order to kind of integrate and include all these sort of varied areas. And even if you kind of take the international side out of it from India, across Europe, it's a highly internationally focused or like landscape. So then that's all coming into the business as well, which is a really good thing. I think putting loads of different mindsets together comes up 100%, rather than if you just have the same mindset, the same type of people and the same culture, it can become stagnant. And I think that's where people learn to appreciate, I suppose you could call it D&I, as to how they start to build the organizations behind that as well. And I suppose talking about people that you sort of brought into organizations and the teams that you've brought, obviously you've met aspiring data scientists throughout your career. So what advice would you offer someone aspiring to go in or become a data scientist aiming to make an impact on the fintech industry?
Yeah, I think my only piece of advice is not only to data scientists, but in general to young people, is always just be curious. There is so much happening now in terms of technologies, in terms of tools, in terms of also different industries developing. Just get yourself exposed to these problems early on. Don't focus on specifically the technical part. Of course, this is the fundamental that needs to be there, but just improve your expertise. Keep learning from various sources, not only from textbook, but also just looking at the industry practitioners, look at different companies, what they're doing, how they're solving specific problems. And I think that's what is important, just to keep close to the business needs. And again, just keep open and adapt to the situation. Just don't think about that, well, you learned a skill set or a set of capabilities and you will live through your whole life with them. It's very much an evolution happening across the years. And I think I have my favorite citation regarding this from Eric Hoffer, who said that in times of change, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And I think that's super valid and important for our today's life. We don't know what's happening in 10 years. We don't know what's happening in 20 years. And I think this is what we need, just to be prepared, to train our muscle, to be adaptable, to learn, to be curious, and just be open and don't stop learning. I guess that's the biggest one.
I always love that one, is the learning part, is like continuous development, because even people who are extra senior, there's still a lot of learning and development to do. There's still so many people you can take as like mentorship or coaching throughout of your career as well, and also the curiosity behind it, particularly in a market like fintech, which is ever changing, evolving, revolutionizing, new technologies, new products, new users. It's kind of having the ability to be curious enough to ask questions, but also just to trial and error, which is more just kind of trying and learning these days. And I suppose kind of looking to wind this down, and one question I love to finish on. Obviously, we spoke through your career from the early stages, all throughout how technology's changed, the implementations of it, the teams, and the advice you would give to aspiring data scientists. But if you was to kind of see yourself or be able to speak to yourself now from when you first started, what bit of advice would you give to your younger self? Knowing what you know now.
Well, that's a tough one, but probably I should say just be kind to yourself.
Find it a little bit tougher.
Just be kind to yourself. I think you don't have to figure it out everything, right? And indeed, no one will do it. I know a lot of people, and sometimes female, reaching out to me on LinkedIn and saying, wow, you've been lucky, you kind of figured out everything from the day one. And the truth is that I never figured it out, right? A lot of things were just going the way they were going, and I was just open to embrace this, right? As I said, I started after my studies working in the big FMCG company. I never was thinking of even working about in fintech and the startup world. Right. And then when I was working in Europe, I never was even thinking working in the Indian company. So I think, you just need to be authentic. You need to be yourself. And things just will figure out one day. Right. Nobody figured out everything from day one. Well, there are probably people who have like big plans where it will be in 5 years and 10 years in my career. That's not certainly me. I'm doing small steps at a time, but I think ultimately just enjoy the journey, right? You don't need just focus on the long-term strategy. You need to understand where you want to be at some point, but I think just enjoying and being adaptable and being as well curious to see where that potentially can bring to and what opportunities to open to you.
No, I think that's a really interesting point. I think it will probably resonate a lot with people, and also be nice just to see, look, it doesn't just fall into place. You've got to be willing to kind of go with the journey and just take baby steps rather than trying to take giant leaps, which I think a lot of us can be guilty of sometimes. So look, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been so nice being able to talk through your journey. It's been really interesting just to get to understand the different aspects, the different viewpoints, and also how you would look at structuring, unstructuring, and developing both yourself, the company, but also the teams around you. I think it's really inspiring and kind of truly interesting. So thank you so much for joining.
Thanks to you, Anna. That was really my pleasure. I enjoyed talking and just truly enjoyed your questions.
Thank you.